pleasure in purity culture or in our culture, it's not just purity. Especially for women, it is minimized. Like it's an extreme. It's all about the women's pleasure or die to self. And we carry this like as a badge of honor. I'm going to deprive myself. Like as moms, we do it all the time of I'm not going to go to the bathroom when I need to. How long can I wait? Or I'm thirsty, but it's inconvenient. Or I'm tired or hungry. I'll eat when everyone else is done. Like we have this martyr idea of it makes us better. But in reality, we are dying a little bit on the inside because we've lost who we are. I am Rebekah LaRobardiere, sex and relationship coach and somatic experiencing practitioner. I've been studying sex and relationships for over 20 years. I want to welcome you to my podcast where we are going to unpack what I've learned. Let's talk about sex. Today, I have a lovely guest, my husband, and we are doing this podcast today because 21 years ago, he proposed to me, and I said yes. And so I jokingly say I'm a hopeful romantic. I'm not hopeless, very hopeful, and I just thought it was very fitting. And so, Sam, thanks for being here.
Yeah, pleasure. I think it'll be cool for me to be able to ask you some questions today on your very first podcast, because I think I don't know, there's probably maybe one of your friends gets more than I do, but I get to see all the behind the scenes stuff. So I think it'll be fun for me to, ask a few questions and dig in a bit. So
yeah, I'm definitely excited. Just thinking like we talk about what I do, but we don't have these conversations of you just asking me questions. So I am intrigued about the questions that you would have for me. Like, are they going to surprise me? Or is it like, oh, yeah, I anticipate this or not? So,
well, I think to kick it off, like, let's start with, so your first podcast, let's start with your orgy story.
My orgy story?
I mean, your origin story. So, yeah, so I think what's interesting for me is like, I get asked a lot what you do. Mm-hmm. And it's always there's two things that happen when I get asked what you do. The first thing is I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun to see how they respond. And the second is also like, oh, how do I actually explain what you do? So when people ask me what you do, I say, you're a sex and relationship coach. Mm-hmm. But then also you just added a few letters behind your name.
Yeah.
So I want to ask about that. So what is a sex and relationship coach?
So a sex and relationship coach is someone that helps people, couples or individuals, almost find their autonomy. And then in doing that, they are able to better understand who they are as a sexual being, because we can't separate our sexuality from our humanity, which we've been socially and culturally conditioned to do, separate sexuality because it's not safe, it's wrong, it's bad. Taboo, all these things. So if I can help people realign your humanity and your sexuality, and it's not something to be ashamed of or feel guilty of, or even learning to be able to be present in your body, because also, again, a lot of us were trained that our bodies aren't to be trusted. And so we've learned to logic and live in our heads and white knuckle our way through life instead of being present in the body and actually trusting our body that it actually does know what it wants. And then if you're able to do that, you can experience pleasure. And if you are able to experience pleasure, life gets so much better. And so I help people lean into that.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then the letters behind your name are SEP, right?
Yes.
So tell me what SEP is, and then tell me how that fits into what you do as a sex and relationship coach.
Great question. So yes, I am a somatic experiencing practitioner, and that is So somatic is where we store trauma in our bodies. So if you've ever been triggered, that is a stored wound or trauma from childhood or whenever. And so what I do is I help people re-regulate or reintegrate their nervous system, because when a trauma happens, whether it's big T trauma, little t, we get stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. And so what I do is I help them finish and regulate so that if that trigger happens again, it doesn't negatively impact them, right? And so in my world, they say what repeats hasn't completed. So if it continues to happen, like a lot of relationships, we all have cycles. So we continually have this same conversation over and over. It's because there's a wound there that hasn't been healed. And so, but what completes doesn't repeat, right? You may have the same conversation, but very different visceral body responses. And so it's helping your nervous system to regulate and be able to experience the pain and the pleasure and the pain in life without being numb. Like a lot of us want to just numb ourselves so that we don't experience these because they're not safe. But the goal of somatics is that your nervous system can come up and it can come down easily without being stuck.
And in the sexual relationship coaching, like I'm always curious if I were in a session with you, which I will never be in a session with you because that's just weird. If I were in a session with you, how might I, like, what would I experience in a somatic environment? Like, let's say I'm talking about, obviously I'm coming to you because I have a reason.
Right.
So let's say my reason is like, hey, I just don't have a strong drive, and when you touch me, like I'm not saying this is real, I'm just hypothetical. And when you touch me, something happens.
You
like,
brace yourself.
I brace myself, or like talk through like how the sex and relationship coaching, because that could very easily be like a lot of talk therapy, like let's talk through what's happening.
Yeah.
But then the somatic side is a lot of like, from my understanding of it, you're experiencing something in your body.
Yeah.
How do those two things work in a coaching session together?
Great question. So as people come in, I'll have them sit down, and first and foremost, I have 3 questions, like what prompted you to reach out to me? And this just kind of sets the stage. And then how did you hear about me? And what is relevant or pertinent that you think I need to know? Don't do a big intake, because if people are coming to me with sexual trauma or other traumas, if I did this huge intake, it would reinforce those traumas before their nervous system is ready. So they'll sit down and they'll tell me what's relevant. And as they're telling me, I'm watching their body movements, their nervous system, their breath, their posture, all of those things. And as they're telling me, if I see activation or an emotion, tears, or a speeding up of their words, I'll pause them and say, hey, what are you noticing in your body? And they're like, well, I just got anxious. I'm like, great, notice. Where do you feel that in your body? And what does anxiety feel like? Does it feel like tingles? Is it heat? All of those things. And then we'll sit with it, because a lot of times we don't want to sit with the pain or the discomfort, or we try to white knuckle anxiety away. And the more you try to white knuckle it away, the more it like lodges in. Right? And so we'll just sit with it. Like, okay, let's acknowledge it. What does that anxiety need? And is this a familiar feeling? Right? And so then leaning into that and noticing if it moves. Is it still there? Is it getting more intense, less intense? Or has it gone somewhere else in your body? Or are you noticing something else? Or does a story come up? And following the track of your body, not necessarily your brain. And then it may bring up an old thing that brought up that anxiety before. But you're following the body's lead. Does that make sense?
So the body's leading, but it's also communicating with the brain,
Yes.
from what I'm hearing. So then you're able to get at the root of something faster? Is that what you're saying? Just because your body's informing your brain of like, this is where that came from? Or what?
So, no, with the somatic, the beauty is you don't necessarily need content or context for this thing to happen, because sometimes people's trauma happens pre-verbal. And so they still don't have the words because they didn't have time or space at the time.
Pre-verbal, like before they could talk? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, before they could talk. And so when that happens, they'll have these visceral body responses, right? And if they have those and they have no words, that's okay. We're going to sit with this discomfort. Okay, what do you need? And then sometimes they'll need to just drop their shoulders. What does that feel like? And then tense up again. And it's allowing your body and nervous system to finish out whatever it missed out on. And it may be young. And when it comes to like sexual trauma, if there was abuse, like a lot of times there will be anger, rage, shame, guilt, all of those things that show up in their body that was never allowed to be expressed.
So you're saying that by completing the physical cycle, that's enough to break a trauma experience overall, or?
It is the top layer of an onion. And so then you're flattening the curve. So let's say it's like this. And so we just took off that top layer. And so next time it'll be slightly less intense.
Okay.
And then we'll do it again and slightly less.
Yeah.
And it's not all in one session. Like meeting with me and dealing with rewiring your nervous system, your belief systems, your biases is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, that's cool. So we went a little deep there, which is great. But I think like pulling back, to the foundation of that. So like, how did you get started in this? Like, what is your, like I said, origin story of how you became, like, maybe tell me a little bit about like how you were raised and how that influenced or impacted the person that you are today and the profession that you chose. Unpack that for me a little bit.
Okay. So I grew up very conservative, yet also knowing, so sex wasn't talked about. It was for marriage only. And I was a relatively good girl. And so I was still very fascinated with sex. And I was like, okay, if I want to have sex, I've got to get married.
Like, okay, so when you say you were fascinated with sex, what did that look like?
So it just meant that it was intriguing. But because I didn't have real sex ed other than growing up on a farm, like the basics, I knew what it was. But I didn't get, like, it is supposed to be pleasurable. And in sex ed, they talk about all of the STDs, STIs, all of the negatives, but they don't talk about that sex is supposed to be pleasurable. But there was this innate knowing that it can be epic, and it's not what the movies portray. Even though I didn't know exactly like what to expect, I just knew I wanted it. And so when I met you and you wooed me really well, I was very intentional because I was like, oh, he's a Marine. He knows what he's doing. And he was a worship leader, so he's got lots of passion.
That's right.
So it was like a twofold win for me. And so I just thought, like, I knew how to choose well to get what I wanted. And then getting married, because of my lack of information and education, I felt bamboozled and a little, we both felt disappointed. My guess. And
we've talked about this.
We have. We were disappointed.
You're not guessing at anything.
I'm not guessing. We were disappointed because I just believed it was just going to be natural and easy and it just works. And it doesn't. And so we got home from our honeymoon and I was like, great, I'm going to figure this out for me and anybody that will listen. So I jokingly say that I've been doing this since 2020, When did we get married? 24.
That's last
Yeah.
year.
Oh.
Last year is 2024.
2004, 20 plus years ago. I jokingly say I've been doing this for 20 plus years because I would talk to anyone that would talk to me. I would get books. Like, I got my first book right after we got home from our honeymoon because I was like, this isn't okay, because I didn't want a normal marriage.
What was your first book?
My first book was, I know the picture on the front.
What is
I
it?
can't remember the name.
What's the picture?
The picture is a naked woman, and like the nipple is cut off. But I know. But it was very clearly a naked woman, and it was like dark. It's like a black and white, but bluish. I still
can
have the
picture
book.
that.
Yeah. I still have the book. It's in my office, actually. And realizing like I wasn't willing to settle for normal. And we've talked about this. Like, I wanted us to be exceptional. And that meant in every area of marriage, which is why I chose sex and relationships, because sex is a huge part of a marriage, but it's not the only part. But a lot of other struggles that come up in a marriage show up in the bedroom or wherever you want to have sex, because there can be past belief systems, wounds, hurts, trust, all of the things, and it shows up and is magnified in the bedroom because you're naked and exposed. And then if you grew up in the purity culture, your job is to protect men, right? And so we've been fed this line.
If you're a woman, right?
If you're a woman,
Yeah.
you're fed this line that it is our job to help men not stumble, to keep men from stumbling, right? So in a sense, in not so many words, they are saying men can't control themselves and they are animals, right? So that is the underlying tone that we are told. And we are now responsible, but we're not allowed to be controlling, but we have to control the men because they're animals. And all of these things play into it. And then you get married, and on your wedding night, you're supposed to be epic, because if you're not, your husband may not want to stay with you.
Yeah, and I think also, I didn't grow up in the period. Well, yeah, I kind of did. I was loosely affiliated. I was at church every Sunday, so I heard everything, right?
Right.
I didn't necessarily buy in. However, I remember hearing things like, "Oh, save yourself for marriage. If you do that, it's going to be the most, like, it's almost like promising this perfect experience. It's going to be more than you could ever imagine." And I think, from our conversations, you have a lot of different clients, and we don't talk specifics, and anybody that's listening to this should know that you are the most locked down vault of information. You've never told me a name. You've never discussed any sort of detail that would ever lead me to know who you're talking about.
Well, that's
right? So I just want to make sure that that's really clear. And I know that you work with a lot of different people from different sexual backgrounds, but a lot of the people that you work with, I think by nature of who you are and your origin story, came out of the purity culture. And you and I use this term, like, a lot of people that have been bamboozled by the purity culture have gotten to a point in their lives where they're like, I was told all these things.
Yeah.
And my experience, like, I've been bamboozled. Like, I've been told all these things and my experience isn't lining up. Now, some people have, it works for them. Like the purity culture, I think there's enough testimonials from people. They'll pull them up on stage about how great it was that they waited and then they came together and sex was amazing. But that is that happens all the time, in church or with products or whatever, but you don't hear about the other side.
Yeah.
So the other side, I feel like, is what some of the stuff that we, you and I talk about a lot, which is purity culture has left a lot of people wanting more and wondering what's wrong with me and why is it not the way that everybody told me it would be. And so how do you help people in those scenarios? Like walk me through like what that might look like from somebody that's been bamboozled by the purity culture.
Yeah. There would be a few questions of like, okay, what do you want? Like have them describe and articulate like what type of sex life or marriage are you wanting? Like shoot for the stars, because once you can dream about it and actually verbalize it, it's a lot easier to start implementing. And it doesn't mean that's where we're going, but it gives a great direction. Right? And once they start doing that, a lot of it is dealing with the discomfort of actually having that conversation.
Yeah.
Or admitting, I don't know what I want because I've never been allowed to have sexual desires. I had to shut down my arousal, so I don't even know what arousal feels like.
Yeah.
And so having those conversations about, okay, this is what it looks like. And if you have people with differing desire levels, recognizing that is actually an opportunity to connect and understand each other instead of seeing one as the better or the lesser, right? It's how do I meet your needs and you meet mine? Or how do I actually bring you pleasure? Because pleasure in purity culture or in our culture, it's not just purity, especially for women, it is minimized. Like it's an extreme. It's all about the women's pleasure or die to self. And we carry this like as a badge of honor, I'm going to deprive myself. Like as moms, we do it all the time of I'm not going to go to the bathroom when I need to. How long can I wait? Or I'm thirsty, but it's inconvenient. Or I'm tired or hungry. I'll eat when everyone else is done. Like we have this martyr idea of it makes us better, but in reality we are dying a little bit on the inside because we've lost who we are. And once we can find who we are, we actually show up better in our marriage. And so I'll work with people on learning to regulate their nervous system, have their partner regulate theirs, and then there's a joint nervous system to regulate. But if you can't regulate yours, you're not going to have the sex life or the marriage you want because you don't even know what you want. And you can talk till you're blue in the face of saying, hey, if you did this, this, and this, I'd feel full. And they do it and feel like they're jumping through hoops, and it still never meets that need because in reality, that's not what they need.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, or did I go off on it?
No, I think it was good. I think it made me wonder. Can you turn a martyr, sacrificial woman to a freak in the sheets?
Sure can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely worked with people where they went from I don't want anything to do with any physical touch to the husband's like I don't know if I can keep up anymore.
Nice.
So, but it's not. I just held space for them to actually tap into what their body is designed to do. And once you allow that life to come in and you actually tap into what a lot of people think is, oh, it's being selfish, oh, it's this, or oh, I'm not allowed to, and you get rid of the not allowed, you get rid of the shoulds, you allow yourself to actually trust yourself, man, you can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes me think like one of your statements that personally from time to time drives me bonkers, but I think it's important, and I think I understand the value of why you say it. But would you unpack for me, like when I ask you a question about sex and relationships, and and I'm looking for a straight answer. What do you always say?
It depends.
It depends. Always, it depends. But I think it's really valuable in what you do. Can you tell me about the philosophy behind, in your coaching, it depends?
Yeah. So there is, with everybody, we are wired very differently. And you may come in with the same symptom, and I'm going to just call it symptom, as someone else. Yet the root cause of it is very different. And so if I told you, if you go home and you do this, and it works for you, and then I told this one to do the same thing, this one actually, I just reinforced the trauma, right? Yeah. This one is able to wow, I've never felt so free. I feel like I can breathe again, all these things, right? Or I noticed I had a twinge of arousal, right? And then this one is locked down, going walking around robotically because I didn't take time to actually listen to their nervous system. So that's why it depends. And in relationships, we all have different personalities, and some people hear things better certain ways. I have clients that I can call out and say, why are you lying to me? And just say, well, you're wasting my time if you're going to continue to lie. And just be outright blunt, honest with that. Others, I have to recognize, maybe that's the only way they knew how to survive. And so what can I do to get a little bit more truth?
Yeah.
Right? And so it all depends. And with especially incorporating somatics into those that have had sexual abuse, just a little bit of exposure to something may be all they can handle. But because their nervous system is different, a little bit of exposure to them could be, or a little bit is all they can handle. And then someone else is that's nothing, and they need a lot more exposure, right? And so it's learning to read the room and holding space for the capacity that they have and helping them titrate or pendulate.
Whoa.
Okay, so that is going from a feeling of pain or activation, a negative, to let's go positive, because being happy or joyful or experiencing pleasure all require an element of relinquishing control, right? And so it is scary for people to live in this world. And so a lot of people live in the negative, because it's predictable, it's familiar, and it may just be, I would rather stay in the dysfunctional familiar than the functional unfamiliar, right? And so I'm taking someone from, let's touch our toes here. This is where we live. I just want you to dip your toes in. What would it feel like to experience a little bit of pleasure?
Yeah.
And even if I say the word pleasure, some people get really triggered by it. They shut down because pleasure isn't accessible. Okay, and so then we'll go back to, what do you enjoy eating? Can you sit and savor a piece of chocolate? And what does that feel like in your body? And allowing yourself to just sit and savor it. And I'll use, we like good wine. And so I'll sit and savor a really good wine, right? And it's allowing the experience and then locking that positive body feel into my body. What does it feel like to actually have enjoyment? And then, yes, I'm going to go back to the negative, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm going to pendulate or titrate, slide to, go over, right?
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't know these big words.
Come back to the positive. And that's the regulating of the nervous system, because we're not trying to avoid pain, because pain is part of life.
Yep.
But if we don't come back to here, then our nervous system is rigid and stuck.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's being able to hold the both and the tension of.
Well, I think that's really interesting because, that applies in sexuality, but to be able to experience pleasure, it feels like you're also teaching a life skill of living a life that, knows how to experience pleasure. Mm-hmm. So now, obviously you're a sex coach and the relationship thing seems obvious. We talked about the somatic side of things. let's talk about some of the things that people think you do that you don't actually do. So I'm going to I'll ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Do you facilitate orgies?
No.
Would you?
No. Let me think about it.
Do you help people manually with technique?
No.
Do you help people with technique?
Yes, but not in the room.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you, let's see, what are some other ones that you get, like, that people want to know?
I don't swing. I don't sleep with clients. I don't touch my clients. I don't, what are a few others? I can't remember my list.
That's good. That's a good list. I think that's probably what everybody's like.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you like when you say sex? I think when you say sex and relationship coach, most people, we don't have a grid for that because, I mean, how many, like we know like marriage and family therapists, we know, all types of different therapists, but like let me ask you this too, like, why should somebody see like a sex and relationship coach versus like a marriage and family therapist?
Great question. Because a lot of times marriage and family therapists are not trained in sexual trauma, or not always sex positive. And
What's sex positive
sex
mean?
positive is you get to be you. In a very small nutshell, but
Sexually?
sexually,
yeah.
And there's this element of we've all had some form of sexuality trauma. Whether it's belief systems, biases, I was born and my parents wanted a son and I'm a girl, right? If any of those come into play, they have impacted you, right? And so it's learning to deal with that. And then there's the sexual abuse. And so there's all of those things to hold space for. And when you deal with sexual trauma, it is very different than other traumas because it is internal and it is part of you that is being violated.
Yeah.
And so if people, like a lot of times, like I will get people that, and just faulty information. They'll come to me and say, well, my spouse cheated on me because I didn't give them enough sex. Or they looked at porn because I'm not doing this. And it's a lack of ownership of each part. And it brings it back to the men are animals, can't control themselves. And if I don't do this, so sex becomes very obligatory for women. And that's one of the things I actually encourage people. If you feel as though your sex is obligatory, then don't do it, which is very counter to our culture. But if you don't want to reinforce your trauma, if you actually want to have a thriving sex life and marriage, then you actually have to be able to choose if and when you want to have sex and what type of touch you want.
Yeah.
And those all fall into this category that I have not found too many marriage and family therapists that have done the work to understand that.
Yeah.
Or a willingness, and this is harsh, to actually do their own work to be able to heal through that of their own. And so if you're not willing to do the work or are uncomfortable talking about it, so if I had clients coming in and I'm uncomfortable talking about sex, they're going to feel uncomfortable. But I do awkward really well, and so it doesn't register to me that this is awkward.
Yeah.
Right? And so holding space for, we can talk about anything, which is why I keep in my title sex, because I could totally name my business something else. It's not quite as much of a shock, but I want people to know right off the bat that we get to talk about these things, and it may be uncomfortable, but my freedom in talking creates more freedom and space for others to do the same.
That makes sense. And then based on what you're just saying, like you've used the word sexual trauma, sexual abuse a lot, which I think that feels obvious, if someone's experienced sexual trauma or sexual abuse, they'd be, a good candidate to come and have some sessions with you. What about people that are like, I really didn't experience abuse that I know of, or I don't feel like I've experienced sexual trauma, but it doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want to leave them out of the conversation.
Great point. Neither do I.
Are they somebody that can come see you as well?
Absolutely, because here's the deal. Your body is designed for pleasure, and not especially, but women, we have an organ that's the clitoris that the only point and purpose is for pleasure. And it has more nerve endings than the penis, and the penis has multi-use, and it's highly sensitive. But a lot of women don't know that our clitoris is only for pleasure, and if we don't have access to experiencing that pleasure, then I would love to help them figure out how to, because it is part of you, and it is liberating and fun and exciting, or it can be. Like, there's a lot of pressure put onto it. And so I don't want to say, oh, sex is just fun, so why wouldn't you want to? Because everyone has a different version of fun. And you may not have had sex that's fun. So, no, it's not fun for you. And that's okay, too. Like, you may not have had sex worth having again.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, but you want to be a person that has sex that's worth having, I'd love to see you, too. So thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. I've poured my life into educating myself and learning and doing the work myself. And so I really hope that you are able to glean from that. And if you have questions, reach out. I would love to have conversations. You can find me on my website, RJL Coaching, or on Instagram. On that note, I would love for you to all take a moment and ask yourself, like, what is my favorite position? What is my favorite thing to do, either with myself or my partner? Because you get to.
Or what is one thing you want to do?
Or what is one thing you want to do? Because why not?